Good morning, everybody. It's great to see you this morning. Thanks for being here as we join together for this time of Bible study. We're studying in the Gospel of Luke on Sunday morning. We're just looking at Luke. We're not trying to do a harmony of all four Gospel accounts, but occasionally we have to look over to one of the other Gospel accounts to get a little point of clarification, and I think we're going to see that in our lesson this morning. We're in Luke chapter 9. Luke chapter 9, we're ready to begin at verse 1. Luke 9:1. Then he called his 12 disciples together and gave them power and authority over all devils and to cure disease. And he sent them to preach the kingdom of God and to heal the sick. And he said to them, take nothing for your journey, neither staves nor scrip, neither bread, neither money, neither have 2 coats apiece. And whatsoever house ye enter into, there abide, and thence depart. And whosoever will not receive you, when you go out of that city, shake off the very dust from your feet for a testimony against them. And they departed and went through the towns, preaching the gospel and healing everywhere. All right, so here we have, again, a straightforward telling of events. And I think the notable thing here is that Jesus gave them power to heal diseases and to cast out demons. So we know that we've been talking a lot about the miracles that Jesus has been doing and continues to do. But Jesus wasn't the only one performing such miracles. And here we have specific reference to him giving power to his 12 apostles to do that sort of thing. I think that's pretty clear, and I don't think we're surprised to know that that is the fact. Kind of curiously, he said, don't take anything for your journey. And he specifies, the things. Don't take what you would normally take to support yourself, to sustain yourself, to provide for yourself on this journey. He says, don't take those things. And it's clear that the expectation was that this sort of thing would be provided by those that they were going out to teach. Now, wonder if maybe we're missing a point when we go off to preach or go someplace. Wayne just went to Ghana. Wayne, you should have gone without $1 in your pocket. It probably was a mistake for you to carry provisions, extra clothes. You shouldn't even take an extra clothes. Are we missing something there? I think actually no. Look over in Luke chapter 22. In Luke chapter 22, verse 35, it says, he said to them, when I sent you without purse and scrip and shoes, lacked ye anything? And they said, nothing. Then he said to them, but now he that hath a purse, let him take it, likewise his scrip, and he that hath no sword, let him sell his garment and buy one. So, again, in our text here in chapter 9, when he told them not to take those things, that was a unique situation for a particular occasion, but that wasn't consistent across the board. And so, here, I think clearly here, Jesus instructed them to do that for a test of the sincerity and genuineness of the people they would be teaching. That if they received the message gladly, they would be willing to provide such things for these men as they went about their work. So again, that was not a universal, all-time, all places kind of instruction. I don't think Wayne did wrong when he took an extra pair of socks with him on his recent trip. I just wanted to point that out. Maybe the bigger question is verse 5. If they will not receive you, when you go out of that city, shake off the very dust from your feet for a testimony against them. Really? That seems kind of harsh, doesn't it? How do you think that sort of instruction would go over in today's religious world? Shake the dust off your feet. If they won't receive your message, then just when you go out, shake the dust off your feet. In other words, very dramatically show that these people have rejected the message and they should be noted for having done so. Shake the dust off your feet. Is that a Christian, this is the way people would say, is that a Christian thing to do? Monty?
The short answer to your question, since it was Christ that says that, that is a Christian thing to do.
Yeah.
In our politically correct society that we're so deathly afraid of possibly hurting somebody's little feelings, we wouldn't want to do that. And our society wants everybody to be, everything's all inclusive. You can go to God, worship however you want to, you can do whatever you want to, God loves you, everything's going to be all right. Well, what Jesus is saying here is if people reject him and his teaching, then shake the dust off your feet, forget about them, go find somebody else. Because you can find somebody that will listen and let you teach.
Yeah.
Everybody's not going to, not everybody's interested in going to heaven. They like it real well here in Tennessee. But what he's saying is find somebody that'll listen, and if they won't listen, go to the next one. Don't worry about it.
I think that's right. I think that's exactly right. That's a judgment call that we have to make from time to time as we're trying to reach people and teach the gospel. Very often it's individual people that we're trying to reach with the gospel message. And sometimes you just have to make a decision that, okay, they're not going to receive that. And I'm going to go to others. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus said, don't cast your pearls before swine. Well, that's a tough call. And again, that sounds rather harsh. But sometimes we just have to make that determination. I think it'll be different for different people. Sometimes it's abundantly clear almost immediately that people have that rejecting disposition. Other times it may take longer before you reach that conclusion, but it's not wrong to reach that conclusion that, okay, I'm going to go to reach others and I can't do any more here. Again, I think that's a tough call, but we're expected to do it. So they went out, and they went as Jesus instructed, preaching the gospel, healing everywhere. So they were successful in accomplishing the miracles that Jesus empowered them to do. But notice, I think we see this so often, and I mean, it's a point of emphasis. The miracles accompanied the preaching of the gospel. And that's what it was all about, right? The miracles served as confirmation of the message that they were preaching because it was a new thing. This was, in our day and time, the gospel has been here for 2,000 years. We don't have to work a miracle to confirm that you should be baptized for the remission of sins. We can reference Acts 2:38, Mark 16:16, 1 Peter 3:21. I mean, we don't have to have a miracle to confirm that the message we're preaching is from God. We've got the Bible. And in fact, we consistently urge people, check it out. Compare what we're saying to the Bible, make sure it's true. But that resource is available. That resource was not available then. This was a brand new message being preached, and the miracles served the confirmation of that message. One of the reasons why we argue that miracles have ended today is because the message has been delivered and confirmed. It does not need constant reaffirmation. So we don't need, one of the arguments we make, it's not the only one, but one of the arguments we make for the end of the miraculous age is the miracles accomplished their purpose and they're not needed anymore. Okay? Any thoughts or comments there? All right. Just a little, almost sort of a parenthetical comment here about Herod. Verse 7, now Herod the Tetrarch heard of all that was done by him, and he was perplexed because that it was said of some that John was risen from the dead, and of some that Elias had appeared, and of others that one of the old prophets was risen again. And Herod said, John have I beheaded, but who is this of whom I hear such things? And he desired to see him. Interestingly, Herod's desire to see and have a direct face-to-face with Jesus is going to be accomplished, right? At the end of Jesus' life, as he's on trial in Jerusalem just before his crucifixion, remember Pilate, so he went before the Jewish council. They sent him to Pilate. Pilate found out that Jesus was from Galilee, where Herod ruled, and it just so happened Herod's in town because it was the big Passover time. And so Pilate wanted to get this hot potato off of his plate, and he sent him to Herod. Herod's a shrewd enough politician that he didn't want to get involved in that. He sent him back to Pilate. But his wish to see him will be fulfilled not all that much later when Jesus is on trial. I've wondered in reading those few verses if Herod, it says he was perplexed, and specifically I wonder if he was troubled over the fact that, that some were saying John is risen from the dead. Because Herod is the one who, of course, was responsible for having John the Baptist beheaded. We know that story, right? Luke doesn't give the full details of that story, but we know that story, that Herod was the one responsible for having John the Baptist beheaded. It almost seemed like he did, as you recall that episode, it almost seems like he didn't want to do it, but he was kind of caught in his pride, and he couldn't back down from the offer that he had made to his wife's daughter, and so he had John beheaded, although you get the idea in reading that in another place that he wasn't all that keen on doing it. Now I wonder what it says about his being perplexed because some were saying that John was risen from the dead. Makes you wonder if maybe that guilty conscience was plaguing him, or he was worried because he knew his part in that. Monty?
It's possible that he was confused because he's wondering what's going on. There's a whole lot of prophets, there's a whole lot of new teachings going on. John came along and was teaching. Now Jesus has come along. Jesus has sent the apostles out on unlimited commission. And so there's all this stuff going on. People say it's John. Well, he'd say, well, I know it ain't John. I done had him killed. He's dead. Some people say it's one of the old prophets, and he's wondering, well, could it be that? Or just all this new stuff's going on all of a sudden. I mean, Jesus' teaching was over a 3-year period, and we're not at the end of that yet. John came along shortly before that. So here's all, Jerusalem's really in sort of an uproar, if you want to look at it that way, as far as religious things are going. The Jewish leaders are in a turmoil over John and Jesus. Jesus and John have been doing their teaching. So what's going on? So he's confused.
So I think you're right. There's a lot of buzz going on all throughout this region about Jesus and the things that are happening surrounding Jesus. And this buzz, if you want to use that terminology, has reached all the way to the king, King Herod. He's hearing this business, and he's troubled and worried and concerned about what all this is, and so he said, "I'm sure John's dead. I beheaded John. Could it be Elijah? How come there's more than one? There's frequent reference to could this be Elias or Elijah? We say Elijah. Could this? Why would they suspect maybe it's Elijah? Wait.
Because Malachi talks about Elijah coming back.
Right. There's a figurative expression in Malachi about John the Baptist. He is Elijah will come. One will come in the spirit and power of Elijah before the great notable day of the Lord arrives. So the prophecy in Malachi actually said Elijah. It wasn't talking about Elijah literally. It was a reference to John the Baptist. He was a likeness of Elijah. But they picked up on that. They didn't understand the ramifications of it, but they often asked, could this be Elijah? Could this be what Malachi was prophesying about? So, again, Herod, there's not a whole lot in those few verses, but I do think it's probably significant that all of this air of what's going on, I guess the air of what's going on here, what is all this about, has reached all the way to Herod. He's hearing these things. He's wondering what this is all about. So there's, when we read the gospel accounts, they're pretty understated. I mean, I think that's actually one of the signs of inspiration in the Bible is that it provides the information, leaves you to supply the emotion, how you might feel about that is left to you. It's not written like humans would write. Humans would write this really, whipping up the emotions in the reader. In the inspired text, you're just given the information, and it's just a straight, unemotional accounting of facts. But you got to believe that in that day and time, if you were in Judea or Galilee at that day and time, everybody's talking about this. This is the consistent conversation around these parts. This is amazing stuff we're hearing about. What's going on here? And the fact that it had reached as high as here indicates just how thorough that was. All right, let's read on. Verse 10. And the apostles, when they were returned. By the way, I thought that was kind of an interesting tie-in. Verse 1, he called his 12 disciples together. But we know it's talking about the apostles because verse 10 says, and the apostles, when they were returned, told him all they had done. And he took them and went aside privately into a desert place belonging to the city of Bethsaida. And the people, when they knew it, followed him, and he received them and spake unto them of the kingdom of God and healed them that had need of healing. And when the day began to wear away, then came the 12 and said unto him, send the multitude away, that they may go into the towns and country round about and lodge and get victuals, for we are here in a desert place. But he said unto them, give them to eat. And they said, we have no more but 5 loaves and 2 fishes, except we should go and buy meat for all this people. For they were about 5,000 men. And he said to his disciples, make them sit down by 50s in a company. And they did so and made them all sit down. And he took the 5 loaves and 2 fish, and looking up to heaven, he blessed them and brake and gave to the disciples to set before the multitude. And they did eat and were all filled. And there were taken up of the fragments that remained to them 12 baskets. All right, this is one of the occurrences where Jesus fed huge crowds of people with just a handful of food. This is the feeding of the 5,000, not to be confused with another episode, the feeding of the 4,000. So this happened more than once, very similar in detail, but different accounts. Here's one place where a reference to one of the other gospel accounts help. There's always a question when you read, like in verse 14, they were about 5,000 men. Now, how's the word men being used there? Is it being used in the sense of humankind? Or is it literally talking about males? And if there are that many males, would there be that many females and children? And so sometimes when you read that, you're kind of left to wonder how that should be exactly accounted for. But in this case, we have help. Look at Matthew 14. That's Matthew's account of this same episode. In Matthew 14, verse 21, they that had eaten were about 5,000 men, besides women and children. So there's Matthew's account of this same episode, and he actually says the 5,000 was literally the males, and there were women and children present also. So how many would this be? Well, I think it would be very easy to imagine this was 10,000 or more. We always call it the feeding of the 5,000, but it's almost certain that this was 10,000 or more people. And they had 5 loaves and 2 fish, and they fed that many. Incredible. Here's what they did, though. They just allowed everybody to take a tiny little pinch because they wanted to be able to publicize that Jesus fed this crowd with just this much food. And so they all conspired together, and everybody just got the most microscopic little pinch of food. And then they went out and said, Jesus fed 5,000 people, 10,000 people with 5 loaves and 2 fishes. Of course, the account completely destroys that argument, right? The modernist who tries to explain away miracles might try to argue that, but he can't get by with that, because verse 17 says after they had eaten and were filled, they ate to their fill, and there were taken up of fragments that remained to them 12 baskets. So again, that naturalistic explanation can't explain away the real miracle that occurred here. Again, notice that it was that Jesus was healing. Verse 11. So Jesus is demonstrating his power over disease. He's really demonstrating his power over nature in multiplying the loaves and the fishes, as we see here. Again, not to confuse this account with another separate episode, the feeding of the 4,000, but this one, the feeding of 5,000. Thoughts or comments here, Monty?
This is really a significant thing because this nearest town, it said was Bethsaida, I think it said. It's probably in a deserted area. There's not a lot of town structure around in this particular area. There's apparently this one small town. When you think about it, if there was an extra 10,000 people all of a sudden showed up and had to be fed, if Jesus had to send them away like the apostles said to, they don't tell them where they would have had to go to get food. There probably wasn't food available within a reasonable day's walking distance to have fed all of those people. If you think about it, an extra 10,000 people shows up in Columbia, or however many it is for Mule Day. People, they prepare for a year to get ready for Mule Day to provide enough and have the structure in place to take care of all those people. So that would be a big deal for us in Columbia if an extra 10,000 people showed up and needed feeding today. Well, this would have been a super big deal here. Those people would have had to scatter and went everywhere, and it would have probably been, some of them would have been really hard pressed to have been able to take care of themselves. So Jesus, to feed an extra 5,000 or 10,000 people here all at once and have 12 baskets left over, that was we think about, Jesus fed 5,000. Now we kind of, in our minds, kind of pass it over. That was a super big deal.
Yeah, it really was. Exactly. Again, and that kind of goes to what I was saying earlier. The gospel doesn't try to whip up emotion. It just gives you the facts of the matter. And as you say, you got to kind of dwell upon it or meditate upon it to see the real impact of the details we're reading here. Dan?
I love this particular story because it shows that it basically disproves this whole notion of theory of evolution and so forth, and how things were created over millions of years. Because if you had rounded up those 12 baskets of all those scraps, and you took them scraps with those fish heads and the bones and stuff, you carried them to a local scientist there at that time, and asked them, how old are these fish? They'd be like, oh, that particular fish takes about 4 years to get to that size. No, that fish is not 4 years old. That fish is 1 day old.
Yeah, or less, yeah.
Yeah.
Good. That's an interesting observation. Never thought of that. Interesting. Anybody else? All right. Let's keep reading here at verse 18. Luke 9, verse 18. And it came to pass, as he was alone praying, his disciples were with him, and he asked them, saying, whom say the people that I am? They answering said, John the Baptist, but some say Elias, and others say that one of the old prophets is risen again. He said unto them, but whom say ye that I am? Peter answering said, the Christ of God. And he straitly charged them and commanded them to tell no man that thing, saying, the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected of the elders and chief priests and scribes and be slain and be raised the third day. Okay, so we're more familiar of this part with Matthew's account. Again, we're not trying to tie all these accounts together, a so-called harmony of the Gospels as is often done. And we've done that before in our studies. We're just looking at Luke's account, but Luke's account of this is not nearly as well remembered as Matthew's account, where Jesus said to Peter, flesh and blood hath not revealed it unto thee, but my Father which is in heaven, in Matthew 16. So how did Peter know this? So there's a lot of speculation. We already talked about that with Herod. The people in general are speculating in the same sort of way that Herod was speculating. Some say you're John the Baptist. Some say you're Elias. Others say one of the old prophets is risen. So that was an undercurrent that was going all around. Who is this man? And what's happening here? Has John the Baptist been risen? Is Elijah come? Like Malachi said, Elijah was going to come. Is this Elijah or one of the other prophets? So they reported that. Jesus asked, whom say the people that I am? They answered that. And then he says, but whom say ye that I am? To the apostles directly. And Peter is the one who speaks up, you are the Christ, the Son of God. How did Peter know that? How did Peter know that Jesus was the Christ? Matthew said, flesh and blood hath not revealed it unto thee. You didn't learn this from a man. How do you learn it, Monty?
But Jesus had been teaching them this, that this was his goal, this who were we, he was from heaven. He taught the Jewish leaders that he was the Son of God from heaven. And he demonstrated and proved it by the miracles that he'd done. And because I believe of their close association with him and the extensive teaching that he'd give them privately when the other crowds wasn't around, they had come through revelation of Jesus, and the miracles proved it, that that's who he was.
Yeah. So he knew it not because, I don't think that, again, we don't have the same statement here in Luke, but I don't think that he had received a divine message saying, now we're going to go to the Mount of Transfiguration here in just a minute, and he did hear it from God directly. But I would argue that Peter's conclusion is drawn from what Jesus claimed and the proof of the claim by virtue of the miracles he was performing. Peter was putting everything together. He was connecting the dots, as we say. And he came to this conclusion. Wayne?
As Jesus is instructing them in John chapters 14 through 16, he says to the disciples, all things that he has are from the Father. So he says, yeah, I'm going to deliver. What I'm delivering to you is from the Father.
Yeah.
And so it would have been literally, as Matthew's account said, but my Father who's in heaven, because everything that Jesus had taught them was from the Father.
Exactly right. Exactly right. So again, I would argue here that Peter is just seeing it all, and he's able to make the connection between what he's seeing and what the reality is. Now, I'm not arguing that Peter's got all of his ducks in a row, because we know that the apostles were still confused about how this was all going to play out. But he's getting there. He's getting the right conclusion. Now, the question we always deal with is why in verse 21 did he say, it says he straitly charged them and commanded them to tell no man that thing, saying the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected of the elders and chief priests and scribes and be slain and be raised the third day. I really think that the explanation we offer there is the only reasonable one to provide, and that is that Jesus is trying to control the progress of developments. So we already said there's this undercurrent of question. What's going on here? Who is this man? What are these amazing things that he's doing? So obviously it has not become fully clear to the general populace who Jesus is. Some more work needs to be done in that regard. More teaching, more miracles, more confirmation of Jesus' identity. It's not time. If it becomes widely publicly publicized that Jesus is the Messiah, then the political opponents of Jesus might rush into action before the time. And so I think the right answer here is that this is just an effort to regulate the progression of events, the timing of events. The word is getting out. We know the word is getting out, but it's not. Jesus is not ready to be crucified yet, and that timing of that needs to be controlled as best possible. I really think that's the only explanation that we can offer on that. Again, but notice, one thing to notice here is the Son of Man is going to suffer many things, be rejected of the elders and chief priests and scribes, and be slain and be raised the third day. So when we get to this at the end of Jesus' life, we need to just always remember and adamantly affirm that the events that happened at the end of Jesus' life were not a surprise to him. He wasn't taken aback. What do you mean? Me? They're coming for me? They're going to kill me? Are you kidding? They're going to kill me? I came to be their king. Jesus didn't anticipate being made their earthly king, and he knew all along the purpose and the outcome of his being on earth. And so anybody who would suggest that unexpectedly the Jews rejected Jesus and crucified him instead of making him king, anybody who says that just doesn't know what they're talking about. But you know, we often talk about the theory of premillennialism, that Jesus is coming back at some future time to establish an earthly kingdom and reign on earth for 1,000 years. He's coming back because he couldn't get the job done the first time, and he's coming back a second time to do what he wasn't able to do the first time. The reason he wasn't able to do it the first time was that the Jews rejected him, and he didn't expect that. Yeah, that whole theory is off, right, on so many points. But the argument that he did not anticipate the rejection of the Jews is false. He fully anticipated it. He told it. He predicted it. Thoughts or comments, Monty?
You know, to make the argument that the Jews rejected him and that he came to be an earthly king to begin with is false, because at one point the Jews that did come and tried to make him king by force, and he rejected their efforts rather than them rejecting him. If he had intended to be an earthly king, he would have been, because they was willing to do it at one point in time. And another thing, Jesus told him, Father would send me 12 legions of angels to stop this, and we don't know how powerful one angel is, but you have to imagine that 12 legions of angels could have wiped out the whole earth, everything in it, whatever. They could have definitely stopped Jesus from being crucified and set him up as being a king if that's what he wanted. We have no power to thwart God's word and his will. And we're also taught that God had this plan, and all this was going to be before he created man, from eternity, before he created the world. God already knew what was going to happen and what was going to have to take place to fix it, and had set this plan in motion from the beginning, because he told at the Garden of Eden that the devil would bruise man's heel, but he would bruise the devil's head. So God was already starting to tell and hint about this plan of salvation that was coming. He knew what was going to happen. Through his providence, and even at this time, even miraculous efforts, he caused it to happen without forcing people to do it, which overwhelms our minds. But nevertheless, that's what took place. Exactly what God intended to happen happened.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. John?
When Jesus told us, it says that my kingdom was not of this world.
When it was before Pilate, exactly. He said, if my kingdom was of this world, my disciples would fight. Exactly right. John 18. Okay. Let's read. We're at verse 20. Right before we get to the Transfiguration, we got to read 23 through 27. Luke 9:23. He said to them all, if any man come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whosoever will save his life shall lose it, but whosoever will lose his life for my sake, the same shall save it. For what is man advantaged if he gain the whole world and lose himself or be cast away? For whosoever shall be ashamed of me and my words, of him shall the Son of Man be ashamed when he shall come in his own glory and in the Father's and of the holy angels. But I tell you of a truth, there be some standing here which shall not taste of death till they see the kingdom of God. All right. So here is some instruction in regards to what it's all about. What's life all about? And what's important? And where should you place your values? And what should be your goals? So, if you're going to come after Jesus, you're going to have to deny self, take up your cross daily, follow him. How would you explain that, take up your cross? I understand deny yourself. How would you explain take up your cross daily and follow me? Monty?
We're going to be included with denying ourselves means we're going to give up things we want and then start doing what Jesus was had us to do. He wants us to be teaching people. We're going to have to be leading by example and also by teaching verbally other people. And it's not going to be, as we sometimes mention, just show up for worship on Sunday. This is a daily lifestyle change. It's not, I'm going to be good on Sunday and I'll be here on Wednesday night and be good, and the rest of the week I'll live how I want to. No, I'm going to live like God wants me to daily. And sometimes that's a burden, because there's sometimes that we have to do things that are uncomfortable for us in order to do that. And maybe that burden of the cross that Jesus had to bear, sometimes that's on our shoulders. We've got to maybe give up family members because they won't live right. They're supposed to be Christians, but they fall away and won't live right. We've got to give them up. And just other things that we might have to do that are physically and emotionally difficult, but we've got to do them because we're going to be followers of Jesus.
I think you're right. Wait.
The cross was so heavy that in Jesus' weakened state, he couldn't actually carry the cross. They had to get somebody else to help Jesus carry the cross. So I think symbolically, I go along with what Monty says. You know, that relates to us. I mean, this cross is not something that we may actually be able to do ourselves. We may actually have to have help, and that's why we're here today. You know, we may actually have help from our brothers and sisters to be able to carry this burden, because it's not light. It's not just something that, and see that, you know, when we talk to our friends from other denominations about, you know, about once saved, always saved, and how we see people that just say, well, I believe in Jesus, and they just kind of just do what they want to do. They're not carrying a cross at all. All they're doing is just saying, oh, yeah, I believe it, and let's just go on. But he's saying that we have to burden. This is a burden for us.
Okay, I think that's all true. Wayne?
We're told that all who love God will suffer persecution. The cross was an emblem of persecution. I think that's what Jesus is telling his disciples. You're going to be persecuted for my sake. So if you want to be a true disciple of mine, then you're going to have to deny yourself all whatever it is, the pleasures of this life, and take up your cross. You're going to be persecuted.
So deny yourself and be willing even to be persecuted. I think that's a good idea. If you were going to sort of write a paraphrase of that, we would say, deny yourself and be willing to suffer persecution even on a daily basis. So I think that's a good way to put it. So verse 24, if you seek to save your life, you'll lose it. But if you lose your life for my sake, you shall save it. So who would be the people who would try to save their lives and end up losing them? Well, that's the people who would dodge the persecution, who would compromise, who would maybe even deny their faith in Jesus in order to avoid losing. In other words, if I announce that I'm a Christian, if I tell people that I believe in Jesus, they may kill me. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to deny that I believe in Jesus because I want to save my life. Jesus says, you go that route, you'll end up losing it. He's talking about eternity, right? He's talking about eternity. He's even going to say in verse 26, when the Son of Man comes in his own glory. So in the end, you're going to lose everything because you tried to save your physical life. But on the other hand, if you lose your life for my sake, Jesus says, the same will save it. I always appreciate the way Monty puts it, and he says this fairly frequently. He says, what's the worst that can happen? We die and go to heaven, right? And I think that's sort of what Jesus is saying here. They may take your life, but you're gonna save it. You're gonna save your eternal soul because you go to heaven. So, what if such we are so isolated from and inexperienced with any persecution of that sort. I mean, we've never faced anything of the kind. So it's kind of hard to relate, isn't it? That it could come to that. But what if it did? Well, we got to be ready to do what Jesus says here. I don't know. We have lived so free from religious persecution our entire lives long that I wonder how well we would react if it came on in force. Boy, that's scary. It's scary to anticipate, but we know what we're supposed to do, and Jesus here has laid out how we ought to react if it gets like that. Wait.
So, you have to ask this question. If you're not willing to do the simple things, the things that are easy to deny yourself, then how do you think you're going to be able to stand the persecution that these people stood?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I'm trying to think of that quote. Something about a green tree, if they've done this, and what's that quote? Somebody find that for me. But the point of it is, if you're not even standing up well in easy times, how are you going to stand up when times get hard? Somebody look that up on your phone. Green tree. I know that it speaks of a green tree, but I can't remember where that is. All right. Verse 25, Jesus obviously makes, and we know the parallel accounts of this, but Jesus, what's a man advantage if he gain the whole world and loses himself or be cast away? Nothing, right? Obviously nothing. It's a rhetorical question. You don't even have to wait for an answer. It's just so obvious that if you gain the whole world, of course nobody can do that. Nobody ever has done that. But if you could, and you traded your soul for it, you're making a bad trade-off. Whosoever shall be ashamed of me and my words, of him shall the Son of Man be ashamed when he shall come in his own glory and in his Father's and in the holy angels. That's got to be something, we got to constantly keep in mind. Am I ashamed? Am I ashamed to be identified with Jesus? Am I ashamed of his words? There are a lot of people who call themselves Christians, but they don't want to connect with the words of Jesus. Jesus said in Mark 16:16, he that believeth and is baptized shall be saved, but he that believeth not shall be damned. I'm not going to take a stand for that baptism thing. That baptism thing is kind of religiously unpopular, and I'm going to shy away from the be baptized thing. I'm a Christian. I love Jesus, but don't expect me to go to bat for that baptism thing. No, Jesus said, if you're ashamed of me and my words. So it's not just identifying with Jesus personally, but also identifying with the words, the truth that he taught in order to be right. Monty?
23:31 says, if they do these things in the green tree, what should be done in the dry?
There you go. There you go. It's in Luke. I wouldn't have even started looking at Luke. Luke 23:31. And the point of it is, if you can't stand up in good times, how are you going to stand up in bad times? I think that's a real challenging thought for us, because we are and have been living in the good times. I mean, free from persecution, almost exclusively, totally free from persecution. I mean, we talk about, maybe sometimes people make fun of us or ridicule us a little bit. Generally speaking, we're not suffering intense persecution of any kind at all, and never have. And yet, if we can't stand up in these times, how will we stand up if times get hard? And that's a good point to make, I think. And then finally, verse 27, and we're just all but out of time. Verse 27, Jesus, I tell you of a truth, there be some standing here which shall not taste of death till they see the kingdom of God. This would go to what we were talking about a minute ago concerning the theory of premillennialism, that the kingdom hasn't even come yet, that the kingdom will come when Jesus returns. So you know how the theory of premillennialism is posed. And most of the proponents of premillennialism think we're right at it now. I mean, the time has got to be immediate almost. So the way this will unfold according to the theory of premillennialism is there's going to be a rapture. All the good people are going to be just caught away. That will leave the earth in a terrible turmoil, 7 years of tribulation on earth. All the good people are gone. Just all the corruption and wickedness is left. And there's going to be tribulation for 7 years. At the end of the 7 years tribulation, Jesus is going to come back with his saints and with the holy angels. The great battle of Armageddon will be fought. Forces of good against the forces of evil. Jesus wins that battle. And he sets up his earthly kingdom for 1,000 years. And at the end of the 1,000 years, there will be final judgment. And people will be assigned to either heaven or hell. All kinds of problems with the theory of premillennialism. But one of the big problems is, Jesus said some of the people living right then would not die until they saw the kingdom come. Well, what about that? If the kingdom hasn't come yet, then either Jesus' statement was false, or hiding away in a cave somewhere, some 2,000-year-old people waiting for the kingdom to come. Doesn't work, does it? Just doesn't work. Doesn't work at all. And so that, of course, I think Mark 9:1 is maybe the verse that the same statement that we refer to more often. But these statements about some will not die till they see the kingdom of God clearly indicates that the kingdom came. And we talk about that. The kingdom and the church are one and the same. It's a spiritual kingdom. It's not a physical kingdom, and so forth and so on. All right. Next week, Lord willing, we'll pick up with the transfiguration, beginning at verse 28. Thanks, everybody.